When my husband told his managing partner that I dabble in wellness products from home, I was standing 3 feet away, holding a glass of Malbec I hadn't touched, wearing a blazer I'd bought for a Forbes 30 Under 30 event 2 months earlier. I set the glass down and said, something like that. He didn't notice my face. He was already steering the conversation back to his latest case. 6 weeks later, at his firm's black tie gala, the one he'd been preparing for since August, the one he'd described to me as the most important night of our professional year. Every partner in that room, along with their spouses and 40 of their most significant clients, found out exactly what dabbling in wellness products actually looks like. I didn't go there to make a scene. The truth just had a way of arriving whether I invited it or not. My husband, Stellan, is a corporate attorney. He's genuinely good at it. He reads contracts the way some people read novels, flagging inconsistencies on instinct, cutting through boilerplate to find the clause that actually matters. For 8 years I watched him build his career at Hargrove & Bell with a single-minded focus I truly admired. What I didn't admire was what happened to his perception of me. Somewhere around year 4. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about being slowly minimized. It doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like erosion. A comment here, an assumption there, until you're standing at your husband's work dinner being introduced as a footnote. It started with a laugh. I remember the exact moment. We were in our kitchen in Lincoln Park, a Thursday evening in early spring. I had my laptop open on the island, running through a spreadsheet with my business partner, Pilar. We'd been developing a line of functional supplement blends, adaptogens, targeted nutrition, science-backed formulas that were starting to get serious traction in the direct-to-consumer wellness space. Pilar had a background in nutritional biochemistry from Northwestern. I had a decade of brand strategy and product development behind me. Together, we'd spent 4 months on market research, manufacturing relationships, and a financial model that our accountant had called aggressive but defensible. I showed Stellan the business plan that night. Not to ask his permission. Not to get a blessing. Just because he was my husband and I was excited. And that's what you do when you're excited. You tell the person you love. He read it for maybe 3 minutes. Then he smiled. Not unkindly. Which somehow made it worse, and said, "Babe, the supplement space is incredibly saturated. You'd be going up against brands with 8-figure marketing budgets and decades of retail relationships. This is a really crowded room to walk into." He handed the laptop back. "I just don't want you to pour a lot of time and money into something that's going to be an uphill battle." Then he went to watch TV. I closed the laptop. I didn't argue. I didn't defend the research. I just thought very clearly and very quietly, "Fine, I'll show you instead." That was the last time I told him anything substantive about the business. Not because I was keeping score. Not because I was setting him up for some elaborate reveal years down the road. I stopped sharing because he had made it clear, in that careful and reasonable lawyer voice of his, that he'd already decided the outcome before I'd even started. And I had learned somewhere in my childhood that you don't water a plant in front of someone who's already decided it won't grow. So I grew it somewhere else. Pilar and I launched Nordvik Wellness 14 months after that kitchen conversation. We started with 3 products: an adaptogen blend for stress response, a targeted sleep formula built around magnesium glycinate and ashwagandha, and an energy stack centered on B vitamins and lion's mane extract. We bootstrapped the first year entirely from savings I'd accumulated over a decade of freelance brand consulting, money that existed in my own accounts before we got married. Stellan knew in broad terms that I had savings. He had never asked to understand the specifics. Our first wholesale account came at month 9. A regional natural grocery chain in the Midwest, 38 stores. They reordered in 6 weeks. By the end of year 1, we had revenue just under $380,000. By the end of year 2, we'd crossed $1.6 million, with placements in 2 national retailers and a subscription customer base growing over 20% month over month. Pilar had brought in a small group of angel investors in the second year. 3 women from her graduate school network, who believed in what we were building and wrote modest checks that let us scale our manufacturing without touching outside debt. Everything was documented. Everything was clean. Our attorney at the time, a patent specialist out of downtown Chicago, had told us our IP portfolio was unusually tight for a company this young. I did all of this from a home office that Stellan walked past every morning on his way to make coffee. He knew I was working. He thought I was running the little shop. He wasn't curious enough to ask for more than that. In the third year, we brought on a director of sales and 3 regional account managers. We hired a head of product development, a food scientist who had previously worked for a company that supplied formulas to brands Stellan almost certainly had in our own kitchen. Our operation was no longer something that could reasonably be called a little shop. But since I'd stopped offering updates and he'd stopped asking, the version of my work that lived in his head had frozen in place sometime around year 1. The specific conversation that changed everything happened on a Thursday night in September. We'd been at a dinner with his colleagues from the firm. Stellan's work events followed a familiar rhythm. Excellent wine, conversation that circled back to litigation strategy, and me answering the same polite questions about my little online business 4 or 5 times before someone changed the subject. On the drive home, Stellan was quiet in that particular way that meant something was sitting with him. "What?" I finally said. "Nothing." Then 3 blocks later, Hadley said something tonight. Hadley was a junior partner at his firm, sharp, precise, the kind of person who assessed every room she walked into and filed away conclusions she'd share later with unwavering confidence. She and Stellan had been in the same litigation cohort for 6 years. What did she say? He parallel parked in front of our building, killed the engine, and sat for a moment with his hands resting in his lap. "She said she thinks you're wasting your potential. That someone like you," she meant it as a compliment I think, "could be doing something real. Something that builds toward something. She said it's a little sad, the way you've kind of," he trailed off. "Kind of what?" Faded into the background, he said it gently, like the delivery changed what the words were. "She said she doesn't understand why someone as clearly smart as you seems content to just dabble in wellness products from home." He flinched. "I know how that sounds. I don't mean it that way." "What do you mean it?" He was quiet for a long time, long enough that the windows started to fog slightly from the outside chill. "I just wonder," he said finally, "if you're really fulfilled. If this is really everything you want your life to look like. At this point in our lives, the people we're building relationships with, professionally, socially, they're going to be asking about careers, about what we're building. And I guess I feel like," he stopped. "Like I'm not enough," I said. "Like I make you look lesser by association." "That's not what I said." "It's what you meant though, isn't it?" I got out of the car. I rode the elevator up without speaking. I brushed my teeth and got into bed and lay there listening to the city outside while Stellan's breathing slowed beside me. 3 days before that conversation, Pilar and I had received a letter of intent from a consumer health holding company called Velora Group, a $2.4 billion firm that had quietly acquired 3 other wellness brands over the past 2 years. They wanted Nordvik. They wanted our formulations, our retail relationships, our subscription infrastructure, and us. Their opening offer had been $13 million for a 55% stake. After 6 weeks of negotiation handled by our M&A attorney, we settled at $16 million for 60%, with Pilar and me retaining full operational control on a 5-year partnership agreement. My share of the proceeds, after the partner split and early investor payouts, $8,900,000. The wire transfer was scheduled for the following Friday. I lay in the dark next to a man who thought I was sad and a little lost, and I made a decision, not a decision about revenge. I want to be clear about this, because I've had to clarify it many times since. I made a decision about visibility. I was done being the background of someone else's story. Stellan's firm gala was in 3 weeks. I called Pilar the next morning while he was at the gym. "The press release," I said. "What if it went live during the gala, not the week after, during?" Silence then. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." She called our PR firm that afternoon. The release was a single page, clean, professional, no flourishes. Velora Group acquires Nordvik Wellness in $1,600 million partnership. It included photographs from our production facility in Evanston, the one Stellan had driven past twice without ever asking why I was going there, and a quote from Velora's CEO, describing us as 2 of the most methodical builders in the functional nutrition space. It was scheduled to go live at 8:45 p.m. on the night of the gala, right as the main program wound down and guests moved into open networking, when every person in that room would have a phone in their hand. I didn't say a word to Stellan. We got ready together. He looked handsome in his tux. He held my coat at the door. In the car, he said I looked beautiful, and I thanked him, and watched the Chicago skyline move past the window and thought about all the things I could have said over 4 years and hadn't. The gala was at a hotel ballroom downtown, the kind of room designed to make everyone inside it feel significant, with lighting calibrated to soften anything unflattering. I'd attended 3 of these events. Each time, I'd played the same role. Pleasant, appropriately peripheral, making small talk in a slow orbit around Stellan while he worked the room. Pilar texted me at 7:30, wire confirmed. We are officially Velora partners. Go have a good night. I tucked my phone into my clutch and accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server, and found that I felt, not anxious, not excited, just very, very still. The particular stillness of someone who has been building toward something for a long time and is finally standing at the edge of it. The partnership announcement came at 8:30. Stellan's name was called. I stood beside him while the firm's photographer got the shot, and I watched his face do the thing it does when he's genuinely moved. That rare, unguarded openness he can't control. He had worked hard for this. That was real and true. I was glad for him. Then, at 8:47, the managing partner's wife leaned toward the woman beside her and said, in a voice that carried weight, "Is that Nordvik? I take their sleep formula every night." The ripple moved through the room faster than I would have expected. A murmur, a pause, heads inclining toward phone screens. Bernard, the managing partner, a man who had met me perhaps 7 times over 8 years and retained approximately none of those meetings, pulled his phone from his jacket pocket, looked at the screen, looked at me, looked back at the screen. Stellan. His voice had a quality I hadn't heard from him before, something close to careful. "Is your wife?" He held the phone up. The headline was right there. Nordvik Wellness co-founders close $16 million acquisition with Velora Group. My photograph. Pilar's photograph. Our story in print with the numbers right there in the second paragraph. Stellan took his partner's phone. I watched his face move through something I will remember for the rest of my life. Confusion, then recognition, then disbelief, then the specific ashen expression of a person who understands they have been fundamentally, completely wrong about someone they have slept beside for 8 years. "Is this?" "Yes," I said. "You Nordvik is yours. Pilar and I started it 4 years ago. We closed the acquisition this week." I kept my voice level, the way I'd learned to do in 4 years of investor calls and retail negotiations and conversations where the stakes were real and composure was the only currency that mattered. The deal valued the company at $16 million. My portion of the proceeds is 8.9. The circle around us had gone perfectly quiet. Bernard still held his own phone. Hadley had appeared from somewhere to my left, and she was very still. 4 years, Stellan said. The words came out hollowed. 4 years. I tilted my head slightly. You told me the supplement space was too crowded, that you didn't want me pouring money into an uphill battle. That was year 1. I stopped updating you because you'd already decided, and I figured at some point the results would update you on their own. I heard someone exhale sharply. I think it was Bernard. Stellan's jaw worked. Hadley said you seemed lost, I offered. Content to fade into the background? I didn't look at Hadley directly. I didn't need to. I know what she said. You told me in the car 3 weeks ago. I've thought about it a great deal since then. I set my champagne flute on a nearby table with a quiet, deliberate click. Congratulations on the partnership, I said to Stellan, and I meant every word of it. You worked hard for it. It's yours. I looked at Bernard. It was a pleasure. I turned and walked out of that ballroom, through the lobby, through the revolving door, and into the October air, which hit me like cold water and felt like the first honest thing I'd felt in a long time. I didn't take a car. I walked 12 blocks in heels I'd forgotten were uncomfortable and called Pilar, from the corner of Michigan Avenue. It happened, I said when she answered. I know, it's everywhere. A pause. Are you okay? I looked up at the lit glass stacked against the sky. I think I will be. I need a few days to work out if that's true. Take them, she said. I'm not going anywhere. I turned my phone off and walked the rest of the way home. The messages arrived in waves when I turned it back on the next morning. 41 texts, 16 emails, 9 missed calls. Stellan's voicemails came in 4 installments, each one a little more stripped of its usual composure than the one before. The first, "Cora, call me when you can, we should talk." The second, 4 hours later, "I don't want to do this over text, I just need to understand, please call me." The third, at midnight, "Bernard called me this morning. He said things about your company that I didn't know how to respond to, because I didn't know any of it. 8 years, 4 years of you building something real, and I didn't know. I need you to help me understand how that happened." The fourth, at 2 a.m., his voice finally sounding like it cost him something. "I've been sitting here going back through every conversation we've had about your work. Every dinner where I summarized you to someone else. Every time I didn't ask. I keep trying to figure out where I stopped seeing you as a whole person and started seeing you as a role, and I can't find the exact moment. I think that's the problem. I think it happened so gradually I didn't notice. And I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need you to know that I understand I was wrong, not just about the business, about everything." I listened to all 4. Then I set the phone face down on the counter and made breakfast. I wasn't punishing him by not responding. I had learned, in years of helping other companies survive crises, that forcing a resolution before you know what you want almost never produces one. I needed to understand what I actually wanted before I said another word. What I wanted, I understood by the 3rd morning, was not the life I'd been living. Not because of the money. The money was real, but it wasn't the wound. The wound was simpler than that. I had spent 4 years succeeding in a marriage where the person who was supposed to know me best had decided, at the outset, what I was capable of, and then never revisited that assumption once. I had let it happen. I had built an empire in the margins instead of insisting it belonged to the main story. That was mine to own. But understanding your role in something doesn't mean you have to keep living inside it. I called my attorney that week and told her I was ready to begin the separation process. She had met Stellan twice at social events and had never seemed particularly surprised by anything. She wasn't surprised now. The text from Hadley arrived 11 days after the gala. I almost deleted it without opening it. I've been trying to figure out how to put this for 2 weeks. What I said at dinner, about you being lost, about wasting your potential, I said it with almost no actual knowledge of your life. I saw someone who didn't talk about herself at work events, and I decided that meant there wasn't much to talk about. It was a lazy assumption, and I made it out loud to your husband, and I've thought about very little else since the gala. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I don't have anything bigger than that. I read it twice. Then I wrote back, "Thank you for saying this. I'm not carrying any of it toward you. Just make different assumptions about the next quiet person you meet." I didn't write again. I didn't need the closure to come from Hadley. I'd already found it in a hotel ballroom, walking out through revolving glass doors into a city that kept moving and didn't require anything from me except to keep moving with it. 3 months later, I spoke at a brand founders conference in Austin. It was the first time I'd been on a stage alone, without Pilar beside me, and I'd been more nervous about it than I'd admitted to anyone. I talked about what it costs to grow something in the dark. About the specific exhaustion of building something real, while the person closest to you has already decided there's nothing there worth noticing. About the moment I'd understood that invisibility wasn't modesty, it was self-erasure dressed up to look like kindness. After, a woman in her late 20s found me at the water station, near the back of the room. She had the particular look of someone who stays up too late, building something. The kind of tired that doesn't come from not sleeping enough, but from pouring more than you have. "My boyfriend says my skincare line is just a hobby," she said. "He keeps asking when I'm going to get serious about a career, like he's being helpful." I looked at her. "Does he ask about it?" I said. "Does he ask what you're working on, what you figured out this week, what's keeping you up at night, in the good way, the excited way?" She shook her head. "Then he doesn't think of it as something worth asking about." I held her gaze. "And you can't build a life on a foundation that's already decided your work doesn't count." Something moved across her face. Not surprise, exactly. More like the quiet recognition of something she'd already known and hadn't let herself say. "Is it worth it?" she asked, "being visible after everything?" I thought about the hotel ballroom. The particular silence that follows when the truth settles into a room full of people who weren't expecting it. I thought about walking out into the October air and calling Pilar from a street corner and feeling, for the first time in years, completely like myself. The part where people find out you've been remarkable all along, I said. That part is very much worth it. She nodded once, the kind of nod that means a decision has been made, and walked back into the crowd. I found my jacket and headed for the exit, stepping out into a warm Texas afternoon, the sun coming in low and sideways and almost aggressively bright. Pilar texted while I was finding my rental car. Fast Company wants to do a profile. Just you, not both of us. They said the story of the woman who built an 8-figure company while her husband thought she was dabbling is culturally necessary right now. Their words. I stood in the parking garage for a moment, reading that sentence twice. Send them my availability, I wrote back. Already did. How was the talk? I looked out through the open side of the parking structure, at the city spread out below in the afternoon light. All that ordinary motion of people living their ordinary lives, none of them knowing or caring, that I had spent 4 years being invisible in my own home, and had decided, finally, that invisible was something I was done performing. Good, I wrote. I think I've figured out how much space I'm actually supposed to take up,